Hi. Tekken's in a pretty depressing state right now. Whether you like or don't like the game, it's hard to deny that there hasn't been a lot of issues with the game, and it's been exacerbated by the fact that all of these issues felt like they've been cropping up within the span of about a month, especially when the game started out so high and then so quickly went downhill. These issues have also been ongoing to the point where I've tried making 4 videos on the topic of the problems of Tekken 8, and then while I've been rendering it or getting it ready to upload, something new has happened which has made the previous video irrelevant. I don't want to be negative. I don't want to just speak negatively about a game that I'm, well, playing a lot and want to enjoy, but it's been really difficult to say much positive things about Tekken 8 recently. And that's also really killed my motivation for playing the game, for making videos here, which is why I haven't really been uploading videos for about a month now. But Evo Japan has finally brought some good news, and I feel like we can finally see at the light of the tunnel where Tekken 8 is going to finally become a game that we don't just complain about, or at least I don't just complain about, because if you see me play the game or you see some of my streams, you'll see that I'm constantly talking shit about this game, but I feel like that's about to end. So let's just discuss some of the main problems that Tekken 8 has been having and what it seems like is happening to make up for those issues. And I want to start with the microtransactions. And the microtransactions are something that has clearly been a big issue. And again, this is something that I wanted to talk about, and then the battle pass came up, and then that made that video relevant, and then new things came up that made that video relevant. So this is the first time I'm talking about it here in the video, but we all already know the problems with the battle pass, and there's not much more that needs to be said. One thing though that I've always thought about this is that the battle pass is so bare bones and void of content that I don't think it's a cash grab. Because if it's a cash grab, this is the laziest, most incompetent cash grab I've ever seen. I mean, for God's sake, we have Blender Ball, which has been obviously the meme, but I think a lot of people forget that there's also Blender Ball 2 with the default checkerboard texture in the premium battle pass, the thing that they make you want to believe costs $6. And then we go to the character items here, and then if we go to Huarong as an example and look at his legacy costume, these textures are clearly ported from the PlayStation 3. Look at the difference between the textures on his jeans versus his muscles. They didn't even try to update the textures, and they're trying to charge you $4 for this, which is frankly insulting. And then you have others like for Yoshi, where they haven't actually adjusted the dimensions for the costume for the character, so you have weird things going on, like the scrunched mouth on Yoshimitsu because his character model has changed from Tekken Tag 2. Absolutely no effort put into these at all, and they want to charge you $4 for these when these should be free. And I know this is supposed to be more of a positive video, I'm getting to that, but I say all of this because I want to illustrate the fact that this was probably done last minute. And if it wasn't done last minute, this is one of the most incompetent things I have ever seen in any game in my life. And I think we understand the reason for that now. And I suspect it's because of this. Free. So we have free content coming, including a new stage, photo mode, and an extension to the story. I suspect that this wasn't something that was planned from the beginning, because I feel like this would have been something that they would have talked about in the Tekken Talk, they would have advertised. And in one of the Tekken Talks, I remember a question being asked about free characters, and then them saying maybe in the future, but this isn't something that they had ever talked about up until now, and it's pretty significant. Now, it is important to note that in Soul Calibur 6 did get free stages throughout the course of its lifetime. The DLC stages for characters, so for 2B, for Halmaru, for Huang, for Setsuka, all of those characters, their stages came free. You didn't have to buy the character, and there were a couple of other stages that had like alternate lighting, and there were a couple of completely new stages that were put into the game for free. So it's not like the precedent isn't there. But one thing Soul Calibur 6 didn't have was free extensions to the story. Now, DLC characters had their own stories that were about an hour and a half, 2 hours long. It's pretty significant, but you did have to pay for the character. There were some updates to Soul Calibur 6's story at the end of Soul Calibur 6 to lead into Soul Calibur 7, but for the most part, those you had to pay for because it's a significant cost. And here we're getting a new chapter to the main story for free in the fall, which I think is pretty significant because normally this is something that you would have to pay for, whether it's in Soul Calibur, Mortal Kombat. I believe Guilty Gear Strive also had this, so it being free is not normal. And my assumption is that the reason why they were able to do this was because of the success of the game. They said, okay, if we put microtransactions in the game and we keep the cost of the microtransactions low, then we can use that money we get from those microtransactions and put them back into the game and give players free content like a free extension to the main story instead of having them pay for it. This is also supported by this tweet from Harada in February when the microtransactions started coming out, that's talking about development costs and the ongoing cost to maintain the game and putting content into the game. Now, the way this was worded when it came out really got me going because he said that the lounge servers are costly to maintain, which gives you the assumption that they're using the microtransactions to pay for the ongoing server cost of the Tekken Lounge that nobody uses and they use as their advertiser space and they charge people to use as advertising. So instead of using that money to put it back into the servers, they're instead pocketing that money with the DLC, or not with the DLC, with the microtransactions. But now when we look in the modern day, in hindsight, this makes a lot more sense. The ongoing costs, the economic situation, that kind of thing that Harada is talking about might actually be about the free updates rather than just, oh, this money is being used to support the ongoing servers, which the game frankly doesn't need. Now, I don't know why they wouldn't have been more open about this, maybe because they didn't want to say anything or promise anything about free content in case the microtransactions flopped and they couldn't get the funding. But that's my guess. And obviously, this is a great thing for the game, even regardless of the justification for or not with the microtransactions and all of that. Tekken 8 getting new free content, new extensions to the main story for free, new stages, the photo mode for free, and presumably continuing this on into the future, assuming that I'm correct and the microtransactions are what's funding these free updates, is fantastic. I really do hope that they're able to keep doing stuff like this because it's going to not only feel more like we're getting value for our money, but also it's going to help keep people interested in the game and coming back to the game when they don't want to necessarily pay for DLC characters, which has been historically the main reason why people would come back to the game, but not giving them the monetary cost to give them that incentive, I think is really smart and really good for the overall health of the game. But I think that the biggest positive outlook that comes from Evo Japan is in the game's direction. A big problem I've had with Tekken 8, really before the game even came out, the first time I saw this game, my initial impression was that it was going to be 50-50 and 50-50 and 50-50. It was basically going to be like gambling, and the reason why is because they took a lot of systems from Soul Calibur 6. They moved into Tekken 8, so I was very familiar with this game system, the heat system, and all of that from the get-go, from the very second that they showed the game. What I said was, after about 2 months, people are going to figure that out and hate the game. And here we are. And regardless of if you're enjoying the game or not, it's hard to deny that Tekken 8 is kind of a kusoge right now. If you've played any other fighting game, it's really difficult to say that this game doesn't have problems. That doesn't mean you can't have fun with it, but there are a lot of situations that clearly aren't intended. There are moves getting buffed when they should be getting nerfed. Azusen is running 3-2. The game is chock full of situations where you get punished for proper defense. We saw Evo Japan with Lily a couple of times where she would do her Oki into Feisty Rabbit, and what ends up happening in that situation when she's in heat is like you eat the low and you eat 40 damage if you stand block. If you crouch block, then she does the mid and does a full combo. And then if you block the mid, she just does chip damage to you and you're minus a billion, so she gets to do it again and there's nothing you can do about it. Situations like that are really not indicative of good game design. Let's just put it that way. And I can go on and on and on. This isn't a video necessarily about how Tekken 8 plays, the problems with it, but one of the major problems I have with the game is that it's a game that has a lot of offensive mechanics without any defensive mechanics. This isn't something that I've seen any other fighting game except DNF Duel. DNF Duel is the one and only fighting game I've seen in recent memory that has a ton of offensive mechanics and just about no defensive mechanics. And we all saw how that game went. And Tekken 8's a similar way. They try to make up for it by making armor moves the defensive moves, but it just, the game as a whole doesn't feel like it meshes together. A bunch of separate, scattered ideas thrown into one game, and there are a myriad of problems with the game because of that. So my fear, because of how long it's been that the game's been out and there's been no changes, no addressing any of the problems, is that they were going to double down on these things. They were going to buff characters, and they were going to kind of make a game like Guilty Gear Strive, where they made it more for the spectators rather than the players. And based on this part of the 1.04 patch notes, I'm relieved to say that it seems like that's not the case. They have set out 3 things that they want to do. 1, characters who are not able to fully exhibit unique characteristics and strengths unique to Tekken 8 will be balanced. 2, characters with disproportionately strong moves or high combo damage will be balanced. 3, situations where one player dominates the attack, making it difficult to utilize defensive techniques effectively, will be balanced. In version 1.05, adjustments are planned to alleviate Category 3 and enhance the value of player defensive techniques by incorporating lateral movement strategies and adjustments to battle systems such as throws, heat dash, heat burst, etc. And this is exactly what the game needed. The problem isn't inherently the game itself. The problem isn't with Tekken 8. The problem is with how they've balanced and incorporated the game's systems. So the fact that they're understanding that, yes, there are issues with this, yes, we need to fix this, and yes, in the future updates, we are planning on making changes so that these aren't overbearing, is great news. It means that they're willing to say, yeah, we made mistakes, yeah, we didn't do it perfectly, we're going to go back on that instead of doubling down on the issues with the game, which is fantastic. This isn't something that you see a lot of fighting game developers doing anymore. With Guilty Gear Strive, we of course saw that, but even with Street Fighter 6, people have been complaining about Drive Rush for a while at this point, and they're not really making any changes. In fact, Street Fighter hasn't had pretty much any changes since the game came out. And then obviously there's Mortal Kombat 1, that's, I don't know where that game is at this point, but it feels like they're more concerned about the DLC characters than the direction that the game is going. So Tekken 8 is sort of breaking the norm here, and I think that's really good, because this game needs it. In fact, I think most modern fighting games kind of need this right now. But again, with it being so rare, I was almost expecting, with everything else that Tekken 8's been doing, with the focus on it being spectators sport, on the focus of the microtransactions and kind of esportsifying the game and making the online system best 2 out of 3, forcing that like Street Fighter style and taking other things from Street Fighter, like how the DLC is presented. And I wasn't actually expecting this. So I'm really, really happy to see stuff like this. And one thing that we can already see from this patch is the change to throws. Throws are one aspect of what I was just talking about when it comes to throwing in a bunch of systems but not considering balance, and maybe considering secondarily, because obviously characters have launching throws, and those are in no way equal to normal throws. Having a guaranteed on counter hit launching throw is absolutely ridiculous. And I remember back in the closed beta seeing a combo with Jack where he did the launching throw and it just killed the opponent. It was a touch of death. And so they're seeing that, and they're saying, hey, we're going to make the attack stop 14 frames. And then on top of that, increasing the counter hit throw window from 10 to 14. So these are great changes. And then also just the general balance changes with characters has been really focused on, like what they said at the top here, buffing the characters that need help. Characters who are not able to fully exhibit the unique characteristics and strengths unique to Tekken 8. And for the most part, the characters that were at the bottom of the tier list, characters like Asuka, Zafina, got huge buffs that directly addressed the problems with the unique aspects. For example, Asuka really wasn't able to use her Naniwa Gusto techniques while she was in heat because they drained so much heat and didn't really give her enough reward to be able to justify it. You would be better off trying to fish for like a sidestep 2 launcher or a forward 1+2 launcher with your heat dash than wasting your heat on running 1+2 when it barely even did anything and cost so much of your heat time. And now they haven't necessarily changed how much heat it costs, but they've made it so that this is just a launcher on normal hit now when you're in heat, which makes it actually worth using. Plus, it being plus 11 means that you can use it at the wall now because of the wall splat, and then you get down 1+2, 1+2 mix up. So really good changes there. And then we scroll down to Zafina and we see changes to Zafina, like for example 1-4 being able to be plus 22 and go into Tarantula and do a mix up from Tarantula, and Scarecrow down forward 1 being going from -7 to +6. So stuff like this is great. And then trying to focus on nerfing characters that are at the top, even if I think in some ways it fails. Like for example with Fong, I don't think that these changes are really that significant or at least good enough. Like for example from crouch down forward 4-1, it says that they've changed the damage to give tactical benefits to use the move in always and just inputting both attacks, but it was already good just doing the first attack because then you would get the back turn mix up, which in heat becomes a mid-low launcher. So that seems a little bit weird to me. It seems strange that they would make that as an adjustment when it was already good to do just the first hit by itself. But making so you can consistently punish is a great thing because that move was unbelievably annoying to have to deal with because of the second hit. Regardless of those facts, we see that like Dragunov got hit really hard, for example. We see that they're trying to adjust characters and move properties so that things that are very frustrating, that really shouldn't be, are less frustrating. And I think that the point here is that this is a new game, right? So they're not going to do everything perfectly. There are going to be problems, and we don't know everything about the game either, but it's important that they're trying. That's what's key. They're trying to limit these things. They aren't just buffing characters so every character is like Fong, or Dragunov, or Juno, whoever. They're trying to make characters more in line with what the mid top tier characters are, which I think is where characters should be. I feel like that's where characters in this game are the most fun, is around A tier, except for Yoshimitsu, who's still the best character in the game. Didn't nerf our 11 frame no sword stance punish, by the way. Still the best punish in the entire game. But this is all good stuff. So overall, even though I didn't really like the top 6 for Evo Japan, I thought it was one of the most boring Evos I've seen in a long time, a lot of good came out of this. We got new free updates, which gives us more context to why the microtransactions happen. We got a new update, a lot of good changes in the update, and a positive outlook for Tekken 8 in the future for once. Finally, the past month has just been problem after problem after problem. We had the microtransactions, we had the battle pass debacle, we had the DMCA strikes on YouTubers' channels and on Twitter, for God's sake. Then we had the matchmaking problem. Then we had the fix to the matchmaking problem and ended up not fixing the matchmaking. And it's just been issue after issue after issue after issue. And finally, I think that we're finally at the point where we can look ahead to the future of Tekken 8 and think with confidence, instead of just speculation, that, yeah, maybe in 4 or 5 months, this is going to be the best Tekken game ever made. And I'm really looking forward to that, because I'm sick of being depressed about this game.